Hello everyone and welcome at this session, Supercharge your productivity, mastering prompt engineering. During this session I will guide you through the Crafting AI prompt framework that I have created, and I will dive into some very nice examples how you can use ChatGPT, for example, to speed up and supercharge your productivity. But first things first. Imagine that someone is newly joining your company and this person tells you that he has never used Google or any search engine before. How would you respond? Think about that for a moment. Would you ask him how he or she will get his information? Or would you just advise him to start using it because it will supercharge your productivity? What would you do? Well, this is actually the reason why I'm doing those kind of sessions. I think that generative AI will really speed up your productivity. And that is not because of something, no, it's because I've seen it myself. I did really speed up my own productivity just by using generative AI. And one thing that is very important here is prompt engineering. And that is why I'm going to talk about that straight away. But let me first introduce myself. I'm Jeroen Egelmeers, full stack developer at Society and a public speaker. I am working as a tech lead at OpenAI and currently as an IT trainer at Capgemini Academy. Well, I've been at very many other companies already before, but I'm going to skip that for now. Let's dive into prompt engineering, because what is it? Well, this is a response from ChatGPT. And imagine that I am just a student just going to school for the first weeks this month because, well, summer has ended. And my teacher asked me to write an essay about World War II in 100 words. Probably as a very lazy student, I will do something like this. I will just put it there in ChatGPT and get the output. And you might think, well, goal achieved. Well, that's not really the case. Because teachers are doing this every year and they have a lot of students doing that same assessment. The problem here is that there will be definitely some red flag raised by this teacher. He or she will find out that this is not written by you or by the student. So you will fail your assessment and your goal is not met. So this is a very good example of a bad prompt. My goal was not reached. But what if I change this a little bit and I do understand prompt engineering? Then I give it some more context to share what I am, what I want to achieve, and actually what my assessment is or task, and I will get a much better outcome. So, for example, if I am still a student that has that assessment, I will do actually the same. So write me an essay about World War II in 100 words. But now I'm asking it to act like a student with A2 English and in the first class of high school. And don't use any difficult words. I just want to make sure that my A2 English, which is a level in English, is met. And the outcome will be similar to what I would write down. And you can see that the outcome is completely different. And actually I can send this to my teacher, fool him a little bit. I did actually have tried this at some teachers because I did also those kind of sessions at schools. And well, they didn't find this as a wrong answer. So they didn't think I used ChatGPT for it. So my goal is met. I've done a lot of talks about this, but every time I got similar questions like, what should be in my prompt? Or how can I get to my goal while using prompt engineering? Well, this is the reason that I created the Crafting AI prompt framework. A framework that guides you to everything that you need to take into account for your prompt. During the rest of the session, I will guide you through this framework, but don't worry if you don't get it directly. I will guide you through and on the end give you some examples how it should work. So let's dive into it. The Crafting AI prompt framework has three very important pillars. Phases. First of all, the crafting phase. During the crafting phase, we are writing and crafting our message. And there are a few things that you should consider during the crafting phase, which I will dive into later on, so no worries. Secondly, you have the validation phase. Definitely if you're working for companies, then it's very important to make sure that you're compliant. So make sure that non-disclosure things are in place. But also make it interactive. it's very useful to make an interactive dialogue with ChatGPT, for example, to get to a better outcome. And finally, you're doing this for a reason. So you have a specific goal to reach. So make sure you reach that goal with your prompts, but also validate if your goal is made. A very good example of this is, for example, a lawyer who did actually use ChatGPT to make his case, but on the end failed due to the fact that, they found out that there were lawsuits that did not exist. So for that reason, make sure that you always validate the outcome. And the reason for that, I will also very nicely show you in the next part. Finally, generative AI is expanding very fast. Every day there will be new plugins or new features, even new applications, and those can really speed up your productivity, but also help your company to achieve their goals. So make sure that you're adapting and improving to those new applications, but also that you're validating the outcome and adapting and improving on that. As you're using an interactive approach, you can follow up questions and make sure that you make the outcome better. So let's dive in the first phase, the crafting phase. During the crafting phase, you have to consider a few things. First of all, context is key. So if you want to write a prompt, you must share some context to make sure that ChatGPT can use that for its outcome. Now, I'm going to use ChatGPT as an example throughout this session, but please note that you can use this for any other application as well, generative AI application. So let's make a LinkedIn post to show you how this works. So if I want to post about this particular session, I have to share what kind of presentation did I give, who were the audience, which platform was I using, about what topic was it. All kind of context that you want to share to ChatGPT to make sure that it knows where to write a LinkedIn post about. Other things that you could include are like examples, keywords, deadlines, arguments, counter-arguments, all kind of things that ChatGPT should consider and take into account to actually generate the output. Secondly, we are going to the register, which is, in my opinion, a bit of a very expensive word of writing style. You don't want to have output that looks like generated by ChatGPT. So like I did in a student example where I was writing that essay about World War II, I now want that ChatGPT is going to write a post for me on LinkedIn that actually sounds like myself. I'm very excited, so definitely it should be excited, but maybe you also want to have it a bit more informal or whatsoever. All kind of things that you want to share with ChatGPT in this part to make sure that ChatGPT is taking it into account. But also tone or grammar, all kind of things that you could share with ChatGPT, what it should consider to bring you to the right output. Then we are going to acting role. At the acting role, you can actually share what kind of format it should use as a base. So acting roles are some kind of templates that ChatGPT is using that are already pre-filled in. So for example, in this case, I can use a LinkedIn expert. A LinkedIn expert is mainly using hashtags, a very exciting tone because it's trained on American data probably, but also a lot of other things that could very useful writing LinkedIn posts, such as not using bullet points but emoticons instead. So while using this, you can still refine it. You can ask ChatGPT how those templates look like and actually refine it by your own needs. So for example, if I don't want to have a very exciting post, I can still ask it to use the LinkedIn expert, so act as a LinkedIn expert, but then don't use a very exciting tone. This way you can really guide ChatGPT to how it should write your output. You can also ask ChatGPT to write something from a specific perspective, such as a specific point of view. Like, how does this person probably look at it? Or write it as a LinkedIn expert, but also that LinkedIn expert is sharing it. All kind of things that you should take into account or want to take into account. One thing I want to share about this is very useful. Make sure that if you're using Act as a LinkedIn expert, you also mention that you want to write a LinkedIn post for me. So write a LinkedIn post for me and act as a LinkedIn expert. But make sure it's not going to write it as a LinkedIn expert, because in that way it will share something like, as a LinkedIn expert, I'm very excited to share that I just had a presentation about crafting AI prompts at the Prompt Engineering Conference. And that is not what your goal is. Then we are going to the format. So you want a specific format to get as an output. In this case, a LinkedIn post. So I want to have a nice title, some context, some description or information, and finally some hashtags. That is the format that ChatGPT should use. Now, if you're using an acting role, most of those things are already in place, but it's always valuable to share what you actually want and what you desire. So for example, I'm a software engineer. We are writing a lot of user stories. If you want to write a user story, you can actually guide ChatGPT how your user story at the company looks like. So for example, it's not the standard format as most people should use it as described on the internet, but we have our own specific way of writing. You can share this with ChatGPT and ChatGPT will take over that format and use it as for the output, which is very nice. Another very nice format you can use and is very useful for example, brainstorming is using tables. When using tables, you can actually ask it to have reference IDs for each row. And this way you can refer to those IDs to ask for more information. This way you're using the interactive approach and you're using a very nice way of formatting it. Finally, you have a specific task. You want to write a LinkedIn post, or you want to translate this document, or you want to review this document. All kind of things you can ask to ChatGPT, but which you should explicitly state in your prompt. Another thing that you could do is, for example, revise or edit. All kind of things that are very useful, but be very specific and think very carefully about which task and word you want to use. Because edit and revise are something completely different, or reviewing is something different than edit. You should take this into account, and I say this because I've done a lot of sessions already and see people struggling with it. So really think before you're acting and think about what you want to do before sharing it with ChatGPT. Now we have our message created. So I'm a LinkedIn expert. I act as a LinkedIn expert. I want to write a LinkedIn post. I want to have hashtags, emoticons, etc. And I am sharing some context about this particular presentation. But it's also very important to have an interactive dialogue. So doing this, you should make sure that it's no yes or no question. But for example, write a LinkedIn post. In this case, you can actually revise it by just asking for it. Another thing that you can do is have a chat with ChatGPT by referring to, for example, IDs, which I stated in the temple example. Using this approach, you will make sure that you will generate much better output. Secondly, non-disclosure. If you're working for companies, it's very important that you're not sharing any confidential data from your company. You also want to take into account things like GDPR. So don't share any confidential data from your company, but also nothing from the people in your organization or even outside your organization. Everything that you're sharing with ChatGPT will be saved to their environment and actually be used to train their models. So this is something you really want to take into account before hitting enter and sending your prompt to ChatGPT. So keep that in mind and validate it before sending it. This way you will make sure that you will not get into tricks like we have seen at some other big companies sharing data, and it will actually eventually be exposed to other users. Then, you are doing this for a reason. So you want to reach a goal. And if I take back the example from the student, you don't want to have that essay right. you was a bit forced to do that assignment. So what you actually want to achieve is reach that high grade. You want to get a very nice point or grade for that assignment. So what you want to do is you actually want to get around it if you're not allowed to use ChatGPT, and make sure that it's really written as you and with the level of English or whatever language you're speaking, if you're writing it in, of your own. So make sure that you're sharing, for example, your own work to ChatGPT to learn it how you are writing your stuff. So for example, if you wrote a blog post or something, just copy and paste it to ChatGPT and make it learn your way of writing. So be sure that you're carefully validating what is your goal and do I reach my goal using this prompt. So now it's time to hit the enter button because we are interactive. We are sure that there is no company data in our prompt or from any people, and we are pretty sure that we reach our goal. So we hit enter and we get our outputs, and we can validate if our goal is reached. If that's not the case, we're going to adapt and improve. But before I continue, let me quickly show this as an example. I asked ChatGPT to validate that I was going to get a word that was right. So I did want to play a hangman game with ChatGPT and use an English word that is right, exists in English, and well, it's not too hard. I was trying around, but on the end I gave up, just as you see in this example. And what you can see, it was actually using a word that doesn't exist. And it did even know it when validating it on the end. And that is also you should do right now. So don't get fooled or don't get tricked in things like what I explained about the lawyer in America, but make sure you validate your output as well. If you've done that, you can start adapting and improving. So, for example, you can make sure that if it's not the desired outcome, that you're using another prompt to actually get to that right output. So, for example, if I wrote that LinkedIn post and I didn't like the second alinea from my post, I can just ask ChatGPT to revise the second alinea and make sure that, well, it will write it a different way or maybe just some different context. Anything that you provide to ChatGPT. But there is one more thing. Generative AI is expanding very fast, so it could be very useful to check some new plugins or new ways of working with, well, those kind of tools. So also adapt and improve your prompting strategy to make sure you're, well known about what the other people that bring to you that you can use to, well, speed up your productivity. So now we reach our goal. And we are done with this framework. Let's get to an example how a prompt like that will look like. So, for example, the prompt could be act as a role, perform task in format requirements, use register and writing style, and use this specific context. So if we are looking at the LinkedIn example, then it would be something like act as a LinkedIn expert with, for example, 10 years of experience. More about that you can find in my blogs on LinkedIn. Write a LinkedIn post for me, be very specific in that. In format requirements, I want to use the best possible hashtags that bring me the highest engagement. I want to use emoticons instead of bullet points, and I also want them because I want to brief some key takeaways from this session. Use register or writing style. I want to use my own writing style, so I'm going to share some context there. Use a formal tone, be very exciting, but here is some context how I'm writing my blogs. Use that to also learn how, well, you have to write this LinkedIn post. And use this context where I'm going to share that I did a session about Supercharge your productivity, mastering prompt engineering. I did it on the Prompt Engineering Conference 2023, actually the first one in the world. I had a very nice audience and we had a Q&A on the end. all kind of things that you could share, and also what did we discuss during the presentation. So for example, how does the Crafting AI prompt framework work, all the different phases, the context, acting rule, register, format and task, etc, etc. Things that you want to share that ChatGPT can use in its outcome. Much more about this you can read on craftingaiprompts.org, so definitely go there, and everything is written out and guides you through the process as well. Please note, this is an example, and you can use the different elements on any way you want. So this is not set in stone. You can just work around it the way you want, but make sure that you actually will have everything in place. And also make sure that you remove any abstractions. Be clear, garbage in is garbage out. So if you're abstract in any of your contexts, ChatGPT will do the same for you, or even make things up, which, well, could lead you to things that does not exist, or even things that you don't want in your post. So now let's get to some examples how this will work. But first, how do you work with non-disclosure? Even if you want to share information to platforms like ChatGPT. In this case, you can use placeholders. And here is a very nice example about that. I'm writing a LinkedIn post from another session I did, but I didn't know yet if I can share the company or the people who did invite me, if I could share them in my LinkedIn post. So I also didn't want to share that to ChatGPT yet. So what I do is I'm using placeholders instead. So in this case, company A or person A and person B. And ChatGPT will do that as well in the output. So what you can see in the output, company A is still between curly braces, and I can later replace that by the content that I'm expecting. This is a very nice way, and you can also use this, for example, as variables in prompt receipts. Another technique that I'm not able to share during this session, but you can read more about on my LinkedIn page. So now let's dive into reviewing, which I really like to do with ChatGPT. I'm writing a lot of different blogs and a lot of different things on the internet, but I'm not really well in the grammar of English, so I want someone to review it. I just don't like it if there are any grammar mistakes in my posts on LinkedIn or on any medium or whatsoever. So what I did normally was sending this to my peers and asking them to review my content. But this takes a lot of time because I have to write it, send it to one of my peers. He or she is reviewing it, sending it back. I am then doing all the reviewing work, so making sure that everything is in the right place. Maybe even sending it back once again to do a final review, and etc, etc. Now, using ChatGPT, I can simply just write my blog, send it to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT can review it. But there is more. You can also make sure that you speed up this process. So let's dive into this example. First of all, how does it work with the Crafting AI prompt framework? So I wrote a prompt here, and first of all, I'm sharing the context. I will share excerpts from a blog I'm writing. So in the next prompt that I'm going to do, the interactive way of working, I'm going to share the parts of my blog, and ChatGPT will reply on it. Then please assume the role of a blog writing expert with 20 years of experience. This is the acting rule. So I want to use the template blog writing expert with 20 years of experience to make sure that that is what it's using to review my blogs. Then the task is review it and edit the content if necessary. And this is very important because I don't want to edit it if it's already correct. I just want to make sure that it's grammatical okay, so there is no grammar mistakes. Maybe if it could make the text a bit better. That is things it could do, but otherwise just leave it as is. Format. Provide the edit output or response with correct. So in this case, if it's correct, it will just reply correct, and otherwise it will edit the response. And this will really speed up your productivity because if you don't have this in place, it will always send the text back to you. So even though you don't make any mistakes or it didn't change anything, it will still reply with you all the text that you entered in exactly the same way. And as ChatGPT is typing it for you, you have probably seen that already, it takes much more time than just getting back correct and you can move on. Keep the same writing style as used. So I want to make sure that ChatGPT will keep the same writing style as I did in my blog post. So I'm going to share a blog excerpts, but still it should keep the same writing style to make sure that, well, everyone has a clear view that is written by me. So that is actually what it's all about. So what I can do right now is just put in some of my blog content and share that with ChatGPT. And what you can see, it will either return correct in the first example, or if I'm just making some grammar mistakes in this case on purpose, it will reply the complete thing back, accept the things that I did wrong, and will fix that for me. And I think this is a very nice example how you can speed up your productivity when using ChatGPT. Another thing that I really like is transcripts. So what I normally did is go to YouTube and watch a video if I want to learn something new. Probably something you're doing right now as well. You're watching this video or watching this presentation and you will learn a lot from that. But what if someone is sending you a YouTube video and actually points you to, hey, that was very interesting in this video, check it out, but doesn't tell you in which timestamp you should start watching? Then it can take a lot of time to watch that video if it's only a very small part of the video that is interesting for you. So let's take this as an example. Here is one of my previous presentations, which takes over an hour. And you can go to the transcript. So this is the Dutch part, but it's the same in English. Go to the three dots to the menu part of YouTube, click on View Transcript, and you will actually get the transcript on the right side of your page. Now you can completely copy this and paste it in tools such as ChatGPT Splitter. Now why I'm doing this? If you have a YouTube video, for example, for 30 minutes or longer, so let's say in this case 1 hour and 50 minutes, then the transcript is probably way too long to enter it completely in once at ChatGPT. Tools such as ChatGPT Splitter are actually cutting this up in chunks that you can provide to ChatGPT with some extra prompt information so that you can actually send everything from that transcript to ChatGPT and you don't have to, well, make it chunks by yourself. So I did bring this to ChatGPT Splitter, made the chunks, and I'm sending that to ChatGPT. And now I can actually ask ChatGPT to get me the key takeaways from this video. And that is very interesting, because that way you can actually really fast get the key takeaways of a video. And if you're, for example, interested in this case in concerns with AI integrations and more about GDPR, then you can ask ChatGPT, where should I start looking in this video? At what time step do I have to start watching to actually get more information about this particular part? And ChatGPT will respond to you with the exact time stamp from the video where you should start watching. This is really helpful and it will really speed up your productivity. Now, finally, I can imagine that I piqued your interest. I hope I did, but it might be still a bit too much. A lot of information I shared in only 30 minutes, and there is much more to share, but yeah, I only have 30 minutes during this session. So I want to challenge you to start using it yourself, because that is the best way to learn it. Go to this particular cheat sheet, download it, and make sure that, well, you follow this cheat sheet to actually craft prompts using the Crafting AI prompt framework. And I'm really sure you will find out that it will really help you crafting the right prompts. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please let me know during the Q&A session. Bye.